and welcome to Our Mind Gym with Renee, a Team Ferris original production, where we believe that motocross is more than just going fast. It is an empowering vehicle that teaches us how to navigate life. Join us weekly as we discuss the life lessons and growth mindset that give us a competitive advantage both on and off the track. Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of our Mind Gym podcast series. I'm your host, Renee Ferris, and today I'm going to be talking you through a very practical exercise to raise your awareness about the power of our relationships and the influence they have on our behavior and our results. Because subconsciously, the people you hang out with and spend the most time with are playing a major role in determining your level of success, both on and off the track. Jim Rohn famously said, "You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." Dr. John DeMartini regularly quotes, "You can't put your hand in a pot of glue without some of it sticking." In fact, this is one of the most universally agreed upon concepts by coaches and teachers around the world. The problem with this is that it has become so cliche that we just don't really take it that seriously. And this is something that's been really obvious in our house as of late, as we've got a couple of young up-and-coming motocross stars staying with us here, and I've been observing just how much they're influenced by Dean and the standards that we hold in our home, which is actually exactly the reason why they're here in the first place, because they realize and recognize the power of influence. So, over the next 20 minutes together, I hope to raise your awareness around the invisible influencing impacting your decisions. As I'm speaking, I encourage you to assess your own influences and identify any changes that you can make to give yourself the best chance of achieving your goals. Now, if you wanted to, you can pause this episode briefly and just write down who you believe to be the names of the 5 people that you currently spend the most time with. Keeping in mind, this doesn't have to be physically. If you only see your friends like a couple of times a week, but you watch YouTube or Instagram every day and follow a particular influencer and feel like you spend more time consuming their content and what they do and promote, write their names down instead. Or even your friends, like your friends from motocross, if you are contacting them and messaging them a lot, it's just whoever you perceive to be the most. All right, now that you have the names of your tribe, let's have a look at the influence. It's really important when doing this that we do it objectively. Now, this is not about critiquing our friends and family. It's about being mindful of our influences, guarding ourselves where we need to, and seeking out new opportunities that support our growth. Okay, let's get into it. The first thing to consider is the type and level of conversations you have. What kind of things do you talk about? Do you spend more time focused on the problems you're facing or coming up with solutions? When you're talking about other people, are you celebrating them or tearing them down? Are you speaking inclusively and trying to learn from them? Or are you creating like some form of separation in the mind, making them either distinctively better or worse than you? And what about when you talk about yourselves? Can you speak openly about your dreams and goals? Or do you have to dim your light to fit in? The interesting point to recognize here is that what you're talking about most is affirming to yourself and others how you see the world. The other thing to note is that what you speak about most, you naturally think about the most. We all think about the things that we're going to talk about, partly because we want to be able to connect with the other person that we're communicating with, and partly because we don't want to sound dumb with not knowing anything on the topic. The super interesting fact about this is that this process actually activates our RAS, our Reticulate Activating System in our brain, which is responsible for filtering our reality. Now, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here. You have a conversation about a particular color car, and then all of a sudden you see them everywhere. The thing is, you were actually seeing these things before, you just didn't notice them. So, what conversations are you having and bringing to the surface that you start noticing all around you? The other thing to just add on here and take note of is when you're with people, The main thing, emotions drive us. And so it's more exciting. We don't often just talk to people about what you have for breakfast and the things that are kind of neutral in our minds. We talk about the things that we're either most excited about or most depressed about, wherever's got the most greatest level of emotion. Because when we're chatting to people, we're trying to bring that across, get them on board, get them over to our side. Which brings us to the next point. So, the second consideration is the type of things we learn from the people around us. So let's think about it. What are we being exposed to? What new knowledge or ways of doing things are we observing? How are the people that you're with treating others? How are they responding to situations? What advice do they give you when you express your problems or concerns? What have you learned from their stories and shared experiences when they've faced similar issues? Before I move on from this topic, I want to also really highlight the quality of advice that you're getting. If you are taking advice and getting recommendations from the people that you're spending the most time with, ask yourself, are you getting financial advice from a poor person? Is this person actually qualified to give you that advice? Do they have the results that you're seeking, or are they actively working towards it? Because we all have opinions on all different kinds of things, but we're not all qualified or even have experience in them to give quality advice. And this is something that Dean really is a huge advocate for and really stressed to me, because throughout his career, there was different mentors and different people that came into his life that were giving him advice and feeding him this and that, telling him what he needs to be doing and what he needs to be focusing on, but they didn't have the results to back them up. And they didn't have the experience either, and therefore the information didn't always work. And looking back and reflecting on his career, one of the big takeaways that he's suggested to me and advised is that if he could have his time again, he would have sought out mentors who had been and walked before him. He had opportunities to speak out and chase the likes of Glenn Bell and other champions, but he didn't. He didn't take up that opportunity because he had other people in his ear selling him on these ideas and pumping him up, telling him how great he was, that made him feel better. And he wasn't necessarily quantifying or qualifying the information that he was getting. And so this is one of those myths and traps that we can easily get caught up in, and something that I think is worth mentioning. All of these things that you're observing and being exposed to are giving you ideas of what's socially acceptable responses and trains of thought. In fact, this is how our kids learn. They don't listen to what we say, they observe what we do. In their little minds, they take note of what we do as approval for them to do it. It also sets the standards of what is the social norm and expectations within your circle. Again, brings me to the third point, standards and social norms. Jay Shetty has a tongue twister saying that says, I am not who I am not what you think I am what I think that you think I am. What this is saying is that we adapt our behavior to what we think the other people we're with will think about us. It's the reason why you'll swear openly in front of your friends, but not your parents or your grandparents. It's also why when you're hanging out like with other athletes and stuff, you're more likely to do a workout and eat healthy than with your school or workmates who prefer movies and a pizza. This is because it's more comfortable to fit in than stand out. In fact, I don't know if any of you used to watch it, but there was this show on, I think ABC or SBS a little while ago called Brain Games. You can look it up on YouTube. I remember I've recalled a couple of episodes on there myself. And brain games were like social experiments where they basically were testing all of these, a whole range of things about how brains work. So naturally, I was absolutely fascinated by the show. I loved it. Anyway, this one social experiment, it was so interesting. They basically had like a whole bunch of people lined up, like paid actors lined up in a line, and they were like doing this test. And then they had a sign over on the other side that had 3 choices, like A, B, or C. They were lines and they were all a different length. And the question was, which is the longest? And so the answer was so obvious, it was B. When you look at it just with that, you can see the answer is B. But what happened is when they had a lineup of people to do it, the first 10 people in the lineup, before they had like randoms off the street joining in to do the social experiment, they all gave the wrong answer. And so because they gave wrong answer after wrong answer after wrong answer, they basically moved over. And then when the next person came, who was like a legitimate volunteer, they looked at it, and even though they thought the answer was B, because that's what their eyesight told them, they seen all of the people over there lining up guessing it was A, that they literally went and lined up with the people on over at column, like line up A. And when they were interviewed after, they said, yeah, I thought it was B, but everyone else went A, so I just thought I must have been wrong, or I must have been seeing it wrong. And it just creates such doubt in our mind. And anyway, there was tons of social experiments about that. Really cool for any other geeks out there that maybe are interested in those kind of things. So yeah, Brain Games is what the show was called. So back to social norms. Social norms are also why some behavior that we see and judge negatively, other people actually perceive as acceptable and sometimes even positive. So not too long ago, I was witness to a fight where a rider started attacking another rider, fist punching and all. On one side, the father was like supporting and encouraging the fight, whereas the other family was like really shocked by the actions that were unfolding and doing everything they could to stop it. So from my perspective, the son who was getting pumped up and supported by his dad, like, yeah, fight on, was of course like mad about whatever had gone on between them, but in my opinion, appeared even more driven by the influence around him and trying to like show his dad that he could stand up for himself. Like visually, I could see him looking over his shoulder for approval and standing like with his chest puffed out as if to say like, look at me, Dad, I'm tough, I'm standing up for myself. And it was so interesting for me to observe as a human behavior specialist to really just watch that all play out. And I was thinking about it afterwards, and I'm sure that the outcome would have looked very different had his role model and influence actually been like dead against fighting, and that behavior not have been like an acceptable conflict resolution within his social circle. So instead, he had like his dad and a heap of his mates like egging him on, and you could just see how much that was driving and escalating the situation. In fact, I'll share a story with you, and this one will actually probably be really hard for many of you to believe, particularly those who know me today. But back in high school, I was quite fiery and pretty easily influenced to the point that I actually got in a punch-up one day at school. And I vividly remember the tribe of people like walking behind me, encouraging me to do it. Fight, you know? But without that social push, there's like no way that I could have had that in me. Like, I was mad at the girl. Don't get me wrong. We had like conflict, but I definitely wouldn't have taken that kind of approach had it not have been, in my opinion at the time, socially acceptable and like encouraged. And that happened to me like quite a lot during my early years of high school. And in fact, my grade 9 school teacher told one of my friends to stay away from me because I was going to drag her down. So despite his opinion, I wasn't actually a bad kid. I just hadn't yet learned how to manage my emotions or empower myself to make my own decisions. So I was being driven by whatever I thought could get me acceptance. So pretty ironic that I'm the one here now warning people about this very thing. But anyway, the good news is that this social pull and standards can equally pull you up. When you spend like a lot of time with people who have the habits that you want to create and are already practicing them, you naturally mirror that. So the key is to have clarity in what you desire, to know what habits and actions will help you fulfill your goals, and then create an environment where that's the norm. Funnily enough, I recently had a mum send her 14-year-old son to come and stay here with us because she believed that Dean and I to be the best role models for him to get him to where he wants to be. So a bit of a flip from back when I was 14 and being told that I was not a good influence. So moral of the story, you can have empowering or disempowering influences, and you can absolutely be one too. The fourth thing to consider, when spending a lot of time with people is their beliefs, their values, and their goals. The simplest way I can explain this one is that we inject the values and beliefs of those who we look up to, and we project our values and beliefs onto those we look down to. Reason being is that we connect better when we relate. The word relationship even starts with the word relate, because we form these relationships based on how well we can relate to each other, when we feel like we can get on the same page about things. And that's why throughout your relationships, you'll notice the exchange of these. They don't always have to perfectly align, but you'll naturally look for things in common or you'll create them. I mention goals as well because when you're spending a lot of time with someone who has a strong conviction working towards their goal, the passion in their voice and their inspired vision for what they're creating can have like a magnetic pull, making you believe that you want what they want. This happened to me many times, setting goals that sounded amazing, but if I'm completely honest, they weren't truly aligned with my values at the time. Actually, funny story, back in 2009, Dean and I were during one of those attempted dating phases. We were hanging out one weekend down in Brisbane, and we were staying with his cousin Ben. And his cousin Ben at the time had a roommate who was into personal development and stuff like that. Anyway, when we just got chatting about different things, and Dean was sharing with him about his goals and his motocross stuff, and you know, I was like, oh yeah, I'm a racer too. Anyway, so what he did was he sat us down and did this like full PowerPoint presentation and got us to do this like goal setting exercise. And what we did was we wrote down on this little piece of paper goals that we wanted to achieve over the next 5 years. Because he's like, you know, he explained to us the power of writing down your goals. So anyway, because of the vibe and Dean's strong conviction for being all about motocross, I naturally set my 5-year goals all around motocross as well. Needless to say, my goals after we left that day didn't go anywhere. I actually don't even know where that piece of paper ended up, and I never took any action towards any of the goals that I'd written down. However, Dean, on the other hand, took it very seriously, and because the goals were so aligned with his vision, with where he wanted to be and what he wanted to achieve, he kept that piece of paper. And 5 years later, in 2014, when he signed the contract to ride for Red Bull KTM over in America, he, just after his first Supercross race over there, he sent me a text, and it was a picture of the goal sheet that we had written 5 years earlier. And he had literally kept that piece of paper and ticked off 3 of the 4 goals that he'd written down. 3 of the 5 goals that he'd written down. There was 2 left to go. I remember seeing it, getting the message, and instantly, as soon as I seen it, I knew exactly when we'd written those goals and what had happened. And I was like, just amazed by his conviction to take it so seriously and actually fully go and chase his dreams and fulfill it. Meanwhile, mine clearly didn't happen. So, moral of this story is that when you set goals that are important to you, you're internally inspired to take the action. No one needs to remind you or motivate you. You've got so much discipline and focus, and you just remember to do it. And you work along that path. But when you set goals that are low on your values, because you're caught up in the moment, you spend time on other things that are a higher priority to you. And in order to do those, you need like external motivation or reminders to get it done. So be mindful of when you set goals to check in with yourself when you're alone and ask, is this really important to me? Or did I get caught up in the moment? And know that it's actually okay to change your mind. You don't have to go through with things just because you got swept up in the moment. Which brings me to my 5th point, which is the energetic transfer. Without getting too much into the science of how this works, just know that we are all made up of energy that vibrates. When we are inspired, we vibrate at a really high frequency. But when we're caught up in our emotions and worrying about things outside of us, we vibrate at a lower frequency, which drags the energy of the room down. Think briefly about who in your life has a contagious frequency that gives you energy and makes you feel like you just want to step up into the greatest version of you. And then think about someone in your life who you feel like exhausted after being around. You don't even have to think about it. You just feel tired even just thinking about spending time with them, even if you don't even do anything. Then look at what are the key differences? What's influencing that energy? And this will help guide you as you seek out the people that you want to spend the most time with. So off the top of my head, that's just 5 ways that we're being influenced. And I'm sure there are so much more on a deeper subconscious level, which is why marketing works so well and we end up buying so much shit that we don't need. So anyway, in summary, we've covered the level and types of conversations, what we pick up and learn through mere exposure, standards and social norms, injection and projection of beliefs, values, and goals, and the energetic transfer. Now that I've hopefully given you enough reasons to take this cliche seriously, I would like to quickly run you through this week's Mind Gym exercises outlined in the episode notes, and then we'll wrap this one up. So, this week's mental reps include 1. Reflect on the topics discussed relative to the people you currently spend the most time with. 2. Be mindful when you're with people this week to see how they're impacting you. Pay attention to how you feel. What kind of things do you do? Are they things that you would do even if you weren't with them? 3. Create a list of 5 to 10 people who you would like to either spend more or less time with. 4. Be considerate of others and their dreams and goals. Identify ways that you can raise your own vibration and be a more empowering influence for those around you. And finally, share this podcast with anyone who you feel could benefit from listening. Thank you again for being here. I appreciate you so much and look forward to our time together again next week. See you Wednesday. If you have been enjoying this podcast and are ready to dive deeper, release your own mental blocks and see for yourself what life is like with more ease and flow, I would like to personally invite you to click the link below and book in your free strategy session. During this 30 minutes together, we will identify the top 3 things that are holding you back and create a customized action plan for you to move forward. Take action now and start thriving on and off the track.